Hi everyone, so I have already attempted to film the story that I'm going to tell you today before. However, when I reviewed the video back it was a bit jumbled and all over the place, and I wanted to do it again so that it would make a bit more sense to people and that I could tell the story a bit more linearly. So today I'm going to be telling you the story of my nose job, let you know a little bit about the experience, what it was like, the results, and I will be showing you before and after photos. I have actually had two nose jobs now. The first one, unfortunately, I don't have before and after pictures for because the hospital that I had it done at didn't take any photographs for me, even though they should have done. So I can show you kind of general photos, that just selfies and photos with my friends that I've took, which I will insert at the appropriate times. So first of all, the first nose job that I had was when I was 21, and basically the problem that I had with my nose was that I had a large bump at the top here. It was kind of like a knife-like shape, came out like this, and I wasn't happy with that shape, and it got to the point where I couldn't even stand having my photo being taken. I know lots of people do this anyway, but I would kind of, if I had a photo taken by a friend, taken by somebody else, I would have to go through social media afterwards and let them know if I approved the photo or not, if they had to be taken down because my nose looked too big in the photo. It came to the point where I was absolutely obsessed with how my nose looked in photos, and generally in day-to-day life I wasn't happy with it either, but because I wasn't looking at myself all the time, I wasn't focused on it. It seemed to really be focused around how I looked on photographs. So that was what made me make the decision to eventually get a nose job, because it became such a focal point of my life. It became where if I'd been on holiday or been to a gig or had a really nice night out with friends, I couldn't even think about how much of a good time I'd had. All I got to think about was how I looked on the photographs, because my nose stuck out that much. The people who I hung out with at the time had such tiny little noses, and mine seemed so huge in comparison, and that's all I could think about. And it may seem silly to some people, but it was just a massive focus for me, and it's something that I couldn't get past. So I ended up making the decision to have the surgery. So the first surgery that I had was when I was 21 years old. I had it with a private hospital, quite a common, quite well known plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery group. I won't be saying their name because I don't know if I'm allowed to, because the things I'm going to say about them aren't particularly nice, so I don't know if it would be a good idea if I do actually say their name, but I'm just going to say it was a private group, well known, television adverts, celebrity endorsements, things like that, and I chose to go with them for that reason, is the fact that they were quite well known, and I just didn't think that things could go as wrong as they did. Basically, it started off where I had made the decision to have the surgery, and I had to visit one of their clinics in Newcastle. When I first went to visit the clinic, it was a great first impression. The clinic that I visited, it was clean, it was bright, it was airy, the staff were really friendly and bubbly, really pretty. It was all female staff that I spoke to originally, really pretty women who had all apparently had cosmetic surgery themselves with this company, so they were there to say, oh, it's an amazing experience, you should definitely go ahead with it, things like that. Like, I remember being sat down having a cup of coffee in one of the it wasn't even a consultation, it was just a waiting room, and one of the members of staff came over to me and was like, yeah, I can see why you want to have a nose job. Yeah, your nose is really big, isn't it? Have you ever thought about getting those teeth fixed as well? Because you've got really bad vampire teeth, haven't you? And I was just like, oh, right, okay, I'd never really thought about it before. I'd always so much focused on my nose that I'd never really thought about how my teeth looked. Until this woman said, and obviously I think they kind of brought in to do that, to make you think, okay, I'm having this done with them and I'm going to have this done as well. So they basically talk you into having extra surgeries when you're there, which is a little bit messed up, I think. But anyway, I had my consultation with the doctor that I was going to see for my surgery. He agreed with what I had to say. He said my nose was too big, I had a large bump at the top, it needed to be removed. Complete in agreeance, obviously, because they were going to get the money for it. I had really high hopes for the surgery, and I only had good things to say about the company at this point. I would tell my friends, oh, do you know what, like, they're doing really well, the staff are really nice, I've been for a couple of consultations at the clinic and it's going really, really well. And then it came to the day of my surgery. And this is when it all started to go downhill. So first of all, one thing that I highly requested at the beginning, because I still had quite severe agoraphobia and I still had really bad social anxiety, so one of my requests that I made to the hospital was that in my drive to my surgery, which by the way, the surgery had to take place, they only have one hospital where they do the surgery, and that's based in Birmingham. Obviously I'm based in Durham, which is absolutely miles away, so I made the request that I be the only person in the car, because, except for the driver, because I had such bad social anxiety. And they said, oh yeah, that's fine, no problem, we generally don't have people share cars anyway. And the car turned up early morning of my surgery, and there was a young lass and her boyfriend in the back of the car, and I was like, what are they doing here? There's supposed to be a private car just for me. Basically there was no explanation, the driver said that he'd been told to pick up this young couple as well, and I was like, I wasn't particularly happy about it. I already felt really nervous about my surgery, and then having to share a car with two people I didn't know made me more nervous, but I just accepted it, and I didn't complain and I didn't kick off. I was just like, right, okay, this is the way it is. So when I arrived at the hospital, it was quite a fancy, quite posh building, quite nice. When I kind of entered inside, it was quite cold and quite just unwelcoming, and the first member of staff that greeted me took me straight down to my room, said, right, this is where you're going to be until your surgery, and I was dropped off there, and she kind of didn't explain anything, didn't tell me what time my surgery was going to be. She just went, like, here's your room, right, unpack your stuff and somebody will come and get you when it's time for your surgery. And I was kind of like, all right, okay, so I'm going to be left on my own, right, that's fine. And then a couple of hours later, maybe, somebody came in to prep me for my surgery. Went down, nobody really said much to me. Went down, had my surgery, was woken back up. I think it was about 3 o'clock by this point when I'd been woken up for my surgery. Was taken straight back to my room. Again, not much was explained to me except for not to touch my face. It was explained that I had lots of bandages on, not to touch my face, not to touch any of the packing, and just to try and relax, and that I might feel a little bit sick from the anaesthetic, and that was pretty much it. There was nobody with me up until, I believe it was about between 10 and 11 o'clock at night was the next time that I saw somebody. Somebody came in to ask me if I wanted some food, and by this point, obviously, as you know, when you have surgery, you have to fast for a certain amount of time beforehand. I'd had my surgery around about 3 o'clock, and by this point it was 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So I was absolutely ravenous. So when they came in, I was like, oh yeah, God, I want some food. And they were like, all right, okay, we'll bring you something off at the time I was a vegetarian, so they said, oh, I'll bring you something off the vegetarian menu. I was like, great. So I waited maybe another 15 minutes or something, and then somebody came in with a drink of water and an egg mayo sandwich, a very, very small egg mayo sandwich, which it's food, and they probably don't want to give you too much because people have sensitive stomachs after anaesthetic, but I was so starving, and I just looked and I was like, as if this is all I have to eat. The next time I did hear from somebody was at 5 o'clock in the morning, when a member of staff came into the room to tell me that I had to pack my belongings and get ready quickly because the taxi was coming for me in half an hour. And this was at 5 o'clock in the morning. Obviously I was still weak and I was still in pain and felt odd from the surgery, and I was told that I basically had to get up and run around and get ready as quickly as possible. In the meantime of this half an hour as well, a nurse came in to remove my packing from my nose. They have to keep the bandages over the top of your nose, but there's packing inside your nose, which I was told, of course, the night before not to touch, so I didn't. However, throughout the night, obviously you can't breathe through your nose, so you have to breathe through your mouth, and my throat became incredibly sore, and it got to the point where I was so tempted to just pull the packing out myself, just ignore what the nurse had to say and just pull it out so I could breathe through my nose again. It was so irritating, but obviously I didn't. And it was just as well, because when the member of staff came to remove my packing in the morning, this lady was actually really nice. The nurse who came to remove my packaging, she was very gentle and very nice with me. When she came to pull it out, I had assumed it was kind of small little roll-ups of cotton wool or something stuck inside my nose. However, when she did remove it, it was almost like bolsters which went up my nose, round the back and into the back of my throat. I guess because the surgery was quite high up, I guess they had to get us as high as possible, so it went round down the back of my nose. And so when she pulled the bolsters out, she had to yank, and I could feel it tugging at the back of my head and the back of my throat, and it was just a really unpleasant experience. Obviously the packing was soaked with blood and mucus, and as she pulled it out, obviously a lot of things came out with it, a lot of stuff came out with it. It was very gaggy, obviously makes you feel quite sick when it happens. And it was pretty much, she pulled it out, gave me something to cover my nose to help pack the bleeding, and basically had to leave the room and said, right, you need to get your stuff together now, the taxi's coming. So I felt lightheaded, I felt dizzy, I was in a lot of pain, but I had to rush around and chuck my clothes back in the bag, get my belongings together and ready to go. Thankfully on the drive back home, I did have the car to myself, so I felt a little bit better, and the taxi driver that they'd given me was a really nice man. He made me feel at ease. We made a couple of pit stops on the way back to obviously get some petrol, and he went into the petrol station and got me a sandwich and some crisps and a drink and things like that, because obviously I was starving still by this point. My stomach felt really shaky from the anaesthetic, so he kept me well fed. The next stage in the process was to have my post-surgery checkup. I went back and I had my bandages removed. I'd had a lot of bruising around my eyes and a lot of bruising over the top of my nose, and when they took all of the bandages away, it was already apparent that my nose didn't look right. It looked out of proportion, and the tip just didn't seem to fit in with the rest of my nose, and it just looked odd. However, it was still swollen. You get told that it can take up to a year for the swelling to fully go down, so I thought, oh, it's probably still swollen on the tip, it's probably just where the bandages been. It didn't look good, but I wasn't too worried. I just thought it was part of the healing process. I was just happy that I'd had the surgery. So eventually, however far along the line it was to have my final checkup with the surgery, I went through and I explained to them that I was having problems in the fact that the septum in the centre of my nose was clearly tilted. You could see that it was tilted to the side like this. The bottom was curved to the side of my nose, and the septum itself was extremely saggy underneath. I will try and insert some photos here so that you can see obviously how bad it was. I mean, I don't have many photos because I tried to avoid taking photos of my nose after that because I was so unhappy, but I will try and insert a photo to show you. And I did also have a large bump over the top of my nose there that couldn't be explained by swelling at this point because I'd gone past the process where the swelling should have completely gone down or mostly gone down. I went to see the doctor and he did agree with me that the swelling didn't look right, so they could offer me a treatment in the form of steroid injections into my nose that would hopefully reduce the swelling. Obviously I agreed to this. I had the injections, was feeling quite positive about the fact that I was going to solve the problem with the swelling, and I got home that night and unfortunately had a really severe allergic reaction to the steroid injections and had to be rushed into hospital in an ambulance, which was completely unexpected. Obviously I was okay, I recovered in hospital and I got to go home a few hours later. But obviously it meant that I couldn't have any further steroid injections. The doctor had suggested that if that first round of injections didn't work, I could have further and hopefully the swelling would go down. Obviously I couldn't have any more because I'd had that bad a reaction, so I went back to the hospital and explained this to them and said, is there anything more you can do about the swelling since I can't have any more steroid injections? And I was told no. I was told that was just the way it was. Some people aren't happy with the outcome of their surgery and that's just the way it is. I was obviously extremely disappointed by this. Just have a cup of tea. I was extremely disappointed by this, disheartened. I was upset at the amount of money I'd felt now that I had wasted. In case you're not aware, the surgery at the time, this was obviously 11 years ago, the surgery at the time cost, I think it was 3,500. So to me, because I was still so unhappy with the shape of my nose, as I say, I had the droopy septum and the large bump at the top. I was still really unhappy with my nose. I still was unhappy to have my photograph taken. So to me, that was £3.5 grand down the drain. And I was absolutely devastated that there was nothing that could be done about it. But I had accepted the story that the doctor told me, that unfortunately some people are unhappy with the outcome of their surgery and that there was nothing more that couldn't be done. And it's just a risk you take as having cosmetic surgery. It's part of the deal. And that, to a certain degree, is true. Not everybody's going to be perfectly satisfied with their appearance once they come out of surgery. However, I did learn years later that the narrative that I was given by this doctor was completely false. So after years and years of being unhappy with my appearance, becoming more and more depressed about the fact that obviously my nose didn't look the way it was supposed to, but also I had started to develop breathing problems because, as I mentioned earlier, the septum was turning to the side at the end. I couldn't breathe out of one of my nostrils. And this became apparent as I slept. I would constantly wake myself up in the night, unable to breathe through my nose. I would wake up snorting like a pig. And it became just very apparent that there was something severely wrong with my nose. And by this point, I think I was either 27 or 28 years old. And I knew that basically I was going to have to go and see my own GP about getting some treatment. So I made an appointment with my GP under the idea that they might be able to give me some kind of nasal spray or some kind of medication that would clear the blockage in my nostril. I did inform them that I'd had rhinoplasty previously, and my GP said, "Oh, why did you have that done?" I explained to him. He said, "Were you happy with the surgery?" I explained that I wasn't, that I was still really unhappy with my septum and the bump, and he was really nice about it. He said, "Well, I think your nose looks lovely, but I understand where you're coming from, so it is best that you see an ENT specialist and they'll be able to make some decisions from there." So when I did go to see the ENT consultant, I didn't have particularly high hopes. I kind of thought what I originally thought was going to happen was going to be the outcome, which was I was just going to get a nasal spray or some medication. However, when the surgeon looked at it, he was absolutely horrified. He basically told me that is not, he asked where I'd been. I explained to him the company I'd went with, and he was like, "I'm horrified." He was like, "This is not how rhinoplasty surgery should be done." He was like, I don't even feel like the guy who's done the surgery was properly qualified. He's really botched this surgery. He was like, he's left your septum completely crooked. He said it's not just swelling. He said the bump in your nose and the bump in your septum, that's not being caused by swelling. He did explain to me that unfortunately, because he's an NHS surgeon, there was nothing he could do about it. They don't offer rhinoplasty surgery on the NHS. They don't offer corrective treatments on the NHS. And that although he would be able to help in some way with my breathing, he wouldn't be able to correct the superficial faults. He wouldn't be able to solve the aesthetic problem. And I said that was absolutely okay. I said I expected nothing more, and that I know he was trying to help as much as he could. So it came to the day of the surgery. Obviously, I'd had such a bad experience with my previous surgery that I was so nervous. However, I came in and was taken to a shared ward, which again was absolutely fine. This was the NHS. I didn't expect any more than that. And the staff that looked after me prior to my surgery were absolutely lovely. They couldn't have given me more attention if they tried. I couldn't believe it. I felt like the other people that were in the ward with me had so much bigger needs and so much worse problems than I did, that I couldn't believe I was being given so much attention. But yes, I went in again. I think my surgery was around about 3 o'clock again, the same as the first time. And I was under for about an hour. And when I first awoke, I must say the pain that I was in my face, in my nose, was the worst pain I have ever felt in my life. It felt like I had been smacked in the face with a cricket bat. It was absolutely excruciating. I was in tears, obviously, from the pain. There was a lovely young nurse who was stood waiting for me at the end of the bed, and she was like, "How are you feeling?" I was like, "Horrible, absolutely horrible." And she said, "Do you want some more morphine?" And I was like, "Mm-hmm." So she gave me the more morphine. Unfortunately, it didn't work, so she asked if I wanted another dose. I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." So she gave me another dose. However, I was still in pain, and she explained to me, unfortunately, she gave me the maximum dose of morphine and there was nothing more she could do. And I was like, that's fine, at the end of the day it's not your fault. I will just have to wait for the pain to go away. Thankfully that pain only lasted about an hour, and then I was moved to the shared ward where I would spend my overnight stay. Again, the staff couldn't have given me more attention. The recovery with the NHS hospital compared to the private hospital, it doesn't compare. Thinking of the fact that in the private hospital I was left by myself for about 8 hours, in the NHS hospital I was barely left by myself for 8 minutes at a time. There was somebody with me constantly coming and asking me, because as I explained before, obviously you've got to breathe through your mouth after the surgery. So you get a really sore throat. Sometimes the pain in your throat is worse than the pain in your nose. So I was offered constant cups of tea. I think in the few hours that I was in recovery, I must have had about 20 odd cups of tea. I was absolutely just wolfing it back. I was offered constant jugs of water. There was always somebody coming in with something to drink for me so it would soothe my throat. There was always somebody in asking if I was okay, asking how I was feeling, if I needed anything, if I needed assistance going to the toilet, which thankfully I didn't. And there was just somebody giving me attention at all times. The ladies that I was in the room with were absolutely lovely as well. There was a lady in the bed beside me who was recovering from throat surgery. She had throat cancer, and she was really nice. She kept asking me how I was, and I was like, why are you asking me how I am? You're the one that's just had like an actual serious surgery, an actual important surgery. Why are you asking how I am? And they were just absolutely lovely. I finally got to sleep around, I turned the lights off around about midnight, so I went to sleep then, had a good few hours sleep, was woken up maybe 7 o'clock in the morning to be offered some breakfast. They gave me a choice of porridge, toast or yoghurt, and I looked at them like this and they were like, do you want all three? And I was like, So I had toast, porridge and yoghurt for my breakfast, as well as the lady in the bed beside me told me unfortunately she couldn't eat her breakfast because she was in too much pain, so did I want hers as well? And I was like, yeah, if that's okay. So I ate an insane mountain of food. I must say as well, I'd also had a sandwich and a piece of fruit I think the night before, as well as my billion cups of tea and glass of water. And so I'd been really well looked after, and it wasn't even suggested that I'd be discharged from the hospital until I think about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon the day afterwards. Following that, the surgeon who'd done the procedure came in to see me, and he explained to me that even though he told me before the operation occurred, he told me that he was only going to do the corrective septoplasty. Just before the surgery took place, he'd had a word with his superiors and had changed his mind and decided to do the full surgery to remove the cosmetic issues as well, to get rid of the cosmetic issues. So he did a 3 surgery in one, which was a septoplasty, a rhinoplasty and a turbinoplasty, which was to obviously fix the large bump on the top of my nose and to pull up the septum as well so it wasn't drooping as much. I will of course show before and after photos, because unlike the private hospital, the NHS hospital did do before and after photos, which they then provided me with a copy of for free as well. As you can see, the difference is absolutely phenomenal. Not only was it a bigger difference than my first surgery, but it was what made me happy, and ever since, it's been about 4 years since my surgery now, and I couldn't be happier with my appearance, with my nose. Obviously I don't think I'm perfect, but the issues that I had, especially with getting my photo taken, they've completely gone away. There used to be a time when I would refuse to have my photo taken, or I would need to be plastered with makeup before I would get my photo taken. Those issues have completely gone. I couldn't praise my doctor more for having decided to make that decision, which was very dangerous for him to do, because it could have put his job at risk as well, because generally, as I say, nose surgeries, cosmetic nose surgeries, just aren't done on the NHS. There generally isn't the funding for it, but he could justify it by the fact that I did have to have the surgery for the breathing problems as well, and if he could do these other 2 surgeries whilst I was already under, then it could be in some way justified. I went in about a few days or a week later to get my bandages removed. As soon as they were taken off, you could see the difference. You could see that the bumps were gone, that the nose was no longer crooked. It just looked phenomenal. I'll show you a photo that I took when I first put some makeup on after having my bandage removed, which I just couldn't be more happy. It looked absolutely amazing. Anyway, I think I've blabbered on for enough now, and I think I've told you as much as I can tell you about my surgery. If anybody does watch this and has any questions about the whole procedure, anything I've missed out, or anything I haven't explained enough, or anything you don't understand, just comment below the video and I'll try my best to answer any questions or to redirect you to the right place. So thanks for watching this video, and long live the NHS.